Hi, this is Roger Moore, and you're listening to James Bond Radio.
Hello, and welcome to episode 148 of James Bond Radio, where today, myself, Mr. Chris Wright, and my good friend, Mr. Tom Sears, will be discussing none other than an MI6 mailbag. We look forward to our listener questions. Tom, are you excited, my friend?
I'm very excited, and it's been a long time since we've done a MI6 mailbag episode, and it suddenly occurred to me, I don't quite know how long ago it is, and I'm just looking on my phone now to see the last time we did.
It's a long time, man.
And I'm scrolling down, and it keeps on scrolling, and I still haven't got there yet. So let's keep going. And I'm back in March of last year, and there still isn't one. So it's been probably a good couple of years since we've done an MI6 mailbag.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Look at that. So, I mean, I'm probably going to keep scrolling and we'll be the end of this episode.
Overdue, then.
But it's long overdue is what I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
So it's always nice.
Yes.
It's always nice to include the listeners, get some thoughts. And it's always good when we get some good thought-provoking questions. I always remember, because we always say, don't we, like, send in something that inspires a bit of conversation. Don't just, a one and done, like who's your favourite Bond or whatever. I always remember when you'd go and see Sir Rog doing his talking shows, you could text in a question and all that kind of stuff. And him and Gareth would always say,
who's your favourite Bond girl?
Exactly. Gareth would always say at the beginning, let's try something a bit interesting. Don't just ask him who his favourite Bond girl is and all that kind of stuff. So have we got, as the man who mans the mailbox, the mailbag,
yes.
have we got some good questions this week, or are they all a load of rubbish?
No. We've got some really good ones. I think there are some interesting topics to be had for debate. I think some of it is going to be a bit of fun when we have a chat about it, a good laugh, and then other things I think might be quite serious and will be quite an interesting chat. Equally, I think as it's been so long, we should perhaps try and make the mailbag episodes a bit more frequent than obviously we have done. Yeah. So if there are anyone who's question doesn't get on today's show but is still really eager to leave us a question, then go on to the jamesbondradio.com webpage, send a voicemail, leave your mailbag questions. So these are like the debating questions. It's not like what was the registration plate of the car in this, that, and the other. We want questions that can get us chatting and debating and talking. So yeah, if you can, if yours doesn't get on today, leave your message, and we've got a lot of fun ones to look forward to later on.
We are, of course, a pair of keen master debaters, aren't we, Chris? So more of those debating style questions, please. Now listen,
I got a degree in that.
As you first class at Cambridge. What is it he says? First with honours at Cambridge, whatever it is, I don't know. Yeah. So I've been scrolling down continuously while you did that little spiel. And do you know the last MI6 mailbag was episode 99 on the 22nd of April 2016?
What?
Good God.
That's insane.
Isn't it?
That is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like insane.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's like,
Yes, well we'll make sure we bring them out a lot more regularly now, because they are good. And like you said, it's nice to get a bit of chat and to hear from the listeners and stuff like that. So so we'll definitely aim to sort of increase the output of the mailbag episodes.
Indeed. Good stuff. Chris will open his sack and let the messages flood forth into our ear holes. So before we do that,
lovely.
Come and join us on social media. Facebook, please. Twitter, you know what to do. Instagram, jamesbondradio.com. Come on over there, send us a voicemail, send us a question as prompted there. You can do that through the website. There's always the donate link over there if you feel like helping keep the good ship JBR afloat. And also, whether you use it or not, it would be lovely if you could leave us a lovely glowing 5-star review on iTunes as well, because that helps us attract more listeners. And obviously only if you feel we deserve it, but give us the 5 stars. If it's 4, come on, give us an extra one. But there we go. So that's my spiel done for this week. I'm mixing it up a little bit. Right. Have we got a listener trivia question?
We do indeed, and the listener trivia today is from Mr. John Mendes.
Hello, Tom and Chris. This is John Mendes calling in from Station P, Portugal, with a listener trivia question for you. So, the question is, in 24 official Eon films, only 4 of them don't we get to hear Bond, James Bond, being uttered by our main character. Can you tell me which 4 James Bond films don't we hear Bond saying, "My name is Bond, James Bond," or just Bond, James Bond? I'll call back with the answer in a few minutes. Hope you get it. Bye.
Wow.
You know what?
That's a tough one.
I think it is a tough one, and it's also a long answer in terms of when we actually get around to thinking about it. We're gonna have to like play through the films, I think, in our heads to try and find out. But that is a good question.
Do you know
really
what?
Question,
I think
John.
I can think of two immediately.
Yeah, I've got two as well,
because they made a big deal about it when the film came out.
Yeah,
but
I've got two.
Yeah, interesting. All right, good stuff.
Yeah.
Good to hear from John, a brother from Station P, Portugal. That's a nice. That's a different little corner of the world to get a message from. So nice one, John.
I wonder if he's ever been to Guincho Beach or Estoril or any of the locations around there.
I feel like you have to, don't you, at the end of the day? But we'll let us know, John, if you've been. Good stuff. All righty ho then. So next up, we need to open the MI6 mailbag, Chris. So let's do it.
Who are you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond.
James.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British hand up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
Pussy. As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Gentlemen, I just want to tell you how much I love your podcast. I've been catching up on all the old episodes and trying to stay current with the new ones, but you guys are just the best. I'm an extreme Bond fan. I got to go to England a couple of months ago, so that was a thrill of a lifetime for me. And I just want to say, I wish they would leave Bond alone. I don't want him politically correct. I like him just like he was. I want him shaken, not stirred. Just quit. I like my Bond to be rowdy with the women and just not so politically correct. Thanks again, guys. You do a great job. And oh, by the way, I have the James Bond ringtone on my phone, so that's available.
Very nice. Nice one, Cheryl. Cheryl sounds like my kind of girl. I like it.
Yes. So she didn't actually give her full name, but that is Cheryl Reeves there who left a message. And you know what? That is a girl after her own heart, isn't it? There is that whole big thing about the PC these days, and it's tough. You always say you want your man, your Bond to be a bit of a, not necessarily a womanizer, but just. No,
I need him to be a womanizer. I do want
that.
Okay,
you need him to be a womanizer.
There's at the end of the day, I feel
isn't that weird? Like just saying it didn't quite feel right because that's what we're programmed to feel at the moment, I guess, to a certain extent, and it is a bit. Yeah,
we live in troubling times, don't we? At the end of the day, which is easy for me to say because there are all sorts of people who are oppressed in different ways, and all the rest of it. And it's a very delicate subject. But on the opposite end of that, and obviously, so bad things shouldn't happen in that regard. But at the same time, these days it seems to be so sensitive that you can't say anything. And even if your thoughts are completely pure and not sort of hateful or oppressive in any way, there is always going to be some person out there. I nearly used a stronger word then, but I
know myself. You did. I could tell.
There's always going to be a person out there who basically will make it a problem, and it's down to their interpretation of what you said, not what you actually said or even meant. And then it's still somehow your fault because you said it in such a way that could be interpreted by someone determined to perceive it that way. That's exactly. And it's just so exhausting after a while, and it's
constant.
In this day and age, it seems to be within the last sort of 5 years, I suppose, it's kicked into overdrive where you can't say a comment like that of you want Bond to be a womanizer. It just causes all sorts of aggravation, and we'll probably be taken off air just for even discussing it. Chris, what do you think?
But equally, what about female characters that what's the opposite of a womanizer? A manizer?
Good question.
But you know what? That's the same difference.
Yeah.
If you've got a strong female character, but her particular thing is she uses men as she needs to, or she just enjoys sex and just wants a bit on the side every now and again. Is that is that acceptable? And the man, sort of the womanizing bit isn't, or is it, it is a bit ludicrous, isn't it? And don't forget, these are characters as well. They're not necessarily real people. And you don't want to sway too far from what the character is meant to be. Personally, I think that too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, you look at something like Sex and the City, right? Which I think that's an important TV show. I am actually quite a closet fan of Sex and the City. Actually, I even went on the Sex and the City, not the films. No, absolutely not.
Okay,
I actually went on the Sex and the City bus tour in New York years ago.
By yourself? Or?
I took my lady, but everybody thought that I was there for her benefit, but it was actually me who wanted to do it. I kind of dragged her along. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I feel like it's important because on the one hand, you do watch a lot of movies, especially older ones, and women are portrayed in a very certain way, sort of very much in servitude to the male figure or whatever. And I get how that must be irritating to ladies who are, perhaps more forward thinking or whatever. But at the same time, no matter what happens, there are always actually people like that in the world. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like if you've got somebody like a Mary Goodnight, for example, who's a sort of bit ditzy, or a Tiffany Case towards the end, you could easily look at a character like that and be like, oh my God, they're portraying women in such a terrible way. And okay, you might have a solid point, but at the same time, there are actually people like that in the world. So I'm not saying all of them are like that, but there are some who are like that. Equally, you've got, a Pussy Galore, who, despite her name, is actually a very strong character. Yeah. And so I would wager, if you look back through the Bond history, there are more stronger female characters than there are not. You know what I mean?
Way more. You could put a handful of the ones that aren't, and the rest are all strong, solid female characters. And equally, I mean, ultimately, I think from what Cheryl said, she wants Bond to go back to kind of like a classic Bond in the way that he is with women. Because if you think about it, Daniels, he's not really had that, has he? Like he's obviously had his dalliances and stuff like that, but it's not quite been. I guess Pierce had it, definitely, didn't he? Tim definitely didn't have it. Roger definitely had it, and Sean had it, and George had it. So it's only a couple of them that didn't quite have it in terms of that aspect. But I mean, how sterile can you make a character by stripping away, everything that makes it a character, sort of thing?
It's one of those things, like some of the most intriguing stories in history are about really bad people. If you think of like even real life ones, whether they're serial killers or gangsters or whatever, and a lot of the time they're horrible people, but that's kind of what makes them interesting, because they're things you and I would never do. You and I are never going to rob a bank, but it would be really interesting to read a book or watch a movie on what it's like to rob a bank, because you're never going to do it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And that's always going to be the way. And it's a funny one, and it is a sensitive subject, I know, on some level, because like I've done a lot of traveling in recent years and visited places where certain types of people have been super oppressed in horrible ways. And it's just, it all boils down to like what patch of earth you're born onto, whether people mess with you too much or not, or have a history of messing with you.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, and it's just total luck of the draw, and that's what it all boils down to. But at the same time, I feel like if you shift your way of thinking to be like, okay, we can't offend anybody, we can't make a joke about any kind of group or any type of person because it might offend them, then things are going to get so boring, man. It's just, there's going to be nothing exciting or entertaining or anything in the world, And I think a lot of it boils down to, and it's easy for me to say, because you and I were born onto a particularly fortunate patch of earth on planet Earth. You know what I mean? And it's easy for me to say, but at the same time, I think a lot of people just need to kind of get a bit of a sense of humor again, because I feel like that's vastly lacking in the world at the moment, in recent years, So I hope I haven't offended anybody with my thoughts there, but I probably have, and that's the truth of it. There's probably going to be some listeners who turn off now. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, everyone has an opinion, and that's important, and that's what the world is about. People have their differences and their opinions, and that's fine, and obviously that's great. But Yeah, I think if you just pandered to everyone, you will pander to no. You won't be able to pander to anyone, if that makes sense. Just because you're never going to be able to please everyone, because that's not possible.
Yeah.
And if you try to sort of please whoever's shouting the loudest, then, you know, there's still going to be other people that aren't happy with what's going on. So, and reverting back to the character of Bond, you know, the way he was written, obviously certain things had changed with the times. And if you look at, you know, the books, in terms of Bond's health, the drinking, the smoking, obviously he still drinks, the smoking less so these days. So the character has changed with the times, but there are certain things you can't take from that character. Otherwise, it becomes something else. Lessens the depth, and exactly, it becomes something else, and it's not the character of Bond. So in a way, then, what would you say? What would you like to see? Either Bond 25 or if they brought a new Bond actor in for Bond 26, that side of things that Cheryl referred to there, with being a bit of a womanizer. How would you like to see that play out then? Like, would you be happy for Daniel to be a bit more like that in Bond 25?
I'd love him to be more like that. There's often that thing we talk about in Spectre where they rewrote the Moneypenny scene where he's in his apartment. Yeah, when they originally shot it, he was sitting there in his bathrobe and she shows up. Yeah. And as she's leaving, you hear a lady's voice from the bedroom say, "James, come back to bed." They reshot it. He's sitting there in his shoulder holster. Yeah. And I'm like, there's an element of Bond in there I'm really missing. Yeah. As awful.
And that would have been subtle as well, wouldn't it? It would have been a subtle way of doing it.
It would have been, yeah. And in the same way, like the parachute thing is a subtle way of doing it. It wasn't like this huge spy love me moment, which is great for that film. But in this case, you don't kind of want to go that far. You need to downplay certain things. But yeah, for me, that would have been the perfect thing. And do you know what? One of the things that makes me smile the most is like, where's 007? And then the next scene, it cuts to him and he's in bed with a lady. Like the beginning of Tomorrow Never Dies is a perfect example, touching up on little Danish. It just makes you laugh and smile. You're like, oh, James, you old devil. You know what I mean? It's like, it's that thing. Yeah. Or Hilly, you old devil, I should say. So yeah, I would love that. And at the same time, you know, we live in liberated times. There's nothing really wrong with that. It's if you want to be freewheeling with things like that, then there's nothing wrong with that as long as nobody's getting harmed. It's like everybody's an adult, everybody's everybody's consenting, and all the rest of it. It's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely, and I think like we shouldn't need to point this out, but the fact, obviously, Cheryl calling in from the female perspective and still being, you know, happy and seeing that Bond is a character and that's what he does, rather than, you know, obviously you get both male and female that sort of can be against it and a bit too pro PC, but it's nice to have that other perspective that no, not every female out there thinks along those lines, and so that was a really bit of a breath of fresh air, really, from Cheryl. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be interesting to hear from somebody who says, do you know what? I would really like them to tone down Bond's antics. I would like him to be a little bit more straight-laced. I'd like him to not drink as much. And I definitely don't think he should be womanizing. He should have one steady partner and that's it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I think if that person was to call in...
Or he should be celibate.
Yeah, all that. If that person was to call in, they're going to be one of those people who just wants to like cause trouble and stir up some annoying debate, and not good in a good way. And B, not somebody I'd ever want to hang out with in a million years because they'd be insufferable. Cheryl, on the other hand, I want to go out for a beer with Cheryl. She sounds like a great time.
Definitely. Yeah. So next time we're over in the US, Cheryl, definitely.
Absolutely.
Sounds like fun.
Good stuff. Have we got another question?
Should we move on to... We do indeed. So our second mailbag question, this should be a little bit more on the light-hearted side of things, is from Mr. Tom Barwick.
Okay, let's do it.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Chris. It's Tom Barwick here. I'm actually calling this time with a listener question for whenever you do your next MI6 mailbag. I want to ask a question about recasting Bond. And it's a question that gets to the fundamentals of who Bond is and what he's about. And it's something that I don't think it's been addressed a huge amount before. And it's this... do you think that Bond should have a hairy chest? Do you think Bond should have a hairy chest? We all know that the bird never makes a nest in a bare tree. We had that scene of Daniel coming out of the sea in Casino, looking fairly waxed, and I've also seen a certain video of Mr. Sears learning to play Live and Let Die, where he sports a very impressive chest rug. So maybe his opinion will be swayed on that, but looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that.
All right.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you just have a little inspection there just to check?
Yeah, I'm not a particularly hairy geezer at all, so I don't know what's going on there. But
maybe you were wearing a jumper at the time. Perhaps.
Maybe I was. I don't know. That's a very interesting question. That's a very funny question. Nice one.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think that's a generational thing, right? Because my old mum, God bless her, I remember she was all about a hairy chest. Now, I come from a family of dudes who are almost completely hairless on our bodies.
Yeah. There's an image for you listeners.
Yeah, not a hairy chest at all, really. But for my mum, God bless her, she loved a hairy chest. And my dad doesn't have a hairy chest, neither do my brothers.
Did he get implants, hair implants?
No, he's still hairless. But none of us can even remotely grow a beard, even in later times. My mum, bless her, she loved Tom Jones. She loved a bit Connery. Yeah. And thought the hairy chest was like a sign of virility, like that was a man if you had a hairy chest. Yeah. And I do think when you go back to those days, 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s, that, if you look at people like Burt Reynolds and stuff, he had a thick old thatch of chest hair, didn't he? And, you go back to Connery and stuff, like those dudes had all that going on. So, and Tom Jones as well. So maybe there's something in that. Now, interestingly, I've in recent years have spoken to my missus about that very thing. And I remember showing her a video of Tom Jones singing, I think it was a cover of Sloop John B by the Beach Boys, an old video of him from like way back in the day. And he's literally stood on the deck of a ship.
I've seen
just a pair of underpants, and he's just like bashing out the song, and there's loads of girls in bikinis dancing around him. And I showed her that video, and I was like, listen, you can be honest, I don't mind. Like, is that or is that not like a real man? Like, does that stir up your loins? And she was like, I find that absolutely repugnant on every level, and I'm not interested in that on any level. And I thought that was interesting. So I feel like that might be a generational thing, whereas ladies of a certain age, maybe, they're all about the hairy chest. The current generation, the younger ones, not so much. I don't know. What do you think?
That's a really interesting point. And I think you have changing fashions and you have changing ideals of beauty in terms of, if you're back 200-300 years ago, the pale skin was seen as, or even 100 years ago, the pale skin was seen as the ideal sort of beauty type skin to have, just because it meant that you had your own home, you're indoors a lot. It was a bit rough and ready if you had a tan. Whereas these days, obviously, if you got a tan, that's kind of like you're out on holiday. You got the sun, you travel and all that, so you got those connotations with it. And I think it's there is that feeling, that similar feeling with the whole changing taste towards chest hair, I suppose. So I think you're 100% right in terms of the generation thing. I still think that there will definitely be women out there that are keen on it, but I think the percentage will be a lot lower now than it was perhaps in the 60s, pushing 70s or whatever. Or men, or other men who might be interested in other men with hairy chests. You never know. But yeah, it's equally, and I guess if you're looking at the modern day Bond with Craig coming out of the water, like Tom mentioned there, he hasn't got a hair in sight really, has he, on his chest or whatever. A bit like you, Tom. Maybe he's from a hairless family. The Craigs don't doth hair as much as others.
I guess not. Yeah.
No, but yeah, it's interesting. I think. The other thing as well is these days there's a lot in terms of health. There's the six pack, there's the pecs, and there's all of that. Whereas if you've got a hairy chest, that's all covered up.
Yeah.
And so you can't really see that type of thing. So I guess that negates the whole look of the that sort of gym fit body type look, you wouldn't be able to sort of show it off as much.
I guess as well. I remember watching something on the TV once about football players, and I think it was like one of the dudes that was in the '66 England squad or something.
Oh yeah,
who was talking about how you got the dudes like David Beckham these days who are like super gelled hair and super stylish and all that kind of stuff, and how back in those days, if you gelled your hair,
Georgie Best,
like they would punch you in the face or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's just a changing times kind of thing. Like Magnum PI, there's another perfect example. Like that's
Tom Selleck.
Yeah, that's like a big sort of hairy dude, isn't he? You know, and he's even got a moustache as well to even accentuate even more. But maybe it's just changing fashions. You know, it's just it's like
there is one thing though. No matter how many women were really into a hairy chest, or how many women or men might still be into a hairy chest, I haven't heard of anyone who's really into a hairy back. So I think the hair needs to be in in certain places.
That's true.
For it to have that effect. Do you think?
Yeah, I think that's
you never hear of women go, "Cool, look at that hairy back. I want a bit of that." And you just don't sort of hear of that too much, do you?
I tell you what, let's get Cheryl to call back in, and let's get Cheryl's Cheryl's thoughts on the hairiness.
chest.
Maybe she's into a hairy back.
Yes.
Who knows? But funny old question. I guess we'll find out with the Bond number 7 after Daniel retires.
So, what would your opinion be if we had the next Bond actor and he did have a hairy chest? Would you mind either way? Is that an issue?
I don't really have an opinion
way?
on the matter. Really, I suppose if he's the right man for the job, I could take it or leave it. You know, it's not. Yeah. It's what I tell you. What I worry about much more is the hairstyle and the length of the hairstyle. That is a real concern for me, especially with Daniel after Skyfall, because like that, as we've often said to me, that haircut really doesn't make him look good, in my opinion, in Skyfall. And I need my Bond to look good, which is why I love GoldenEye so much, because Bond looks so rad in that whole thing. Pierce is another one, isn't he? He was rocking a rug, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And George, bit of a little bit of one going on and stuff. So I think Roger obviously wasn't. Tim, do we ever get to see Tim topless? Actually,
it's a good question.
I don't think we do. Do we? Do we ever see him topless?
Maybe in like the array in the Afghanistan sequence.
That's the only one that was coming to mind, really. But anyway, so interesting, but good question, Tom. I like it. It's a good debating.
Absolutely, good stuff. Yeah. So our next question.
So are we going to have a JBR Hall of Fame where everyone sends in photos of their chest hair?
I think
are we going to avoid that?
Let's skip that one, unless some of our lady listeners want to get involved in that. Because, let's face it, it's, there's a lot of Bond girl calendars that have been floating around over the years, where you get honey in a bikini and all the rest of it, which we very much appreciate. If the lady listeners or even some of the gentlemen listeners would like to see a bit of that, let us know.
We could do a JBR hairy chest calendar.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. Righty-ho then. Next question comes in from Simon Drake. Let's have a listen.
Hi guys, this is Simon Drake from Brighton, big fan of the podcast. I have a discussion point about Timothy Dalton and his work with the director John Glenn. I get the impression that Timothy Dalton has a much more of a serious take on the character, much more of an acting approach to it. And John Glenn, maybe it's fair to say, is not as much of an actor's director than he was a technician director or action director. I was just wondering what you two thought, whether a different director would have maybe brought a bit more out of the performances from the two Timothy Dalton films. I've heard rumours that Dalton, by the time License to Kill came around, he wasn't very happy because he wasn't getting as much from his director that he probably wanted. And I know he was meant to be in the Christopher Columbus film that John Glenn directed, and he then pulled out. So I was just wondering, on a discussion point, whether you feel that John Glenn was the right director for Timothy Dalton, or whether a Lewis Gilbert or a Terence Young, somebody like that, or a new director would have brought a bit more out of those two Timothy Dalton films. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Keep up the good work. All the best.
That's a good question. I know it's interesting you referenced Timmy not being happy by the end of License to Kill, because I believe in John Glenn's autobiography he mentions them having a Barney on set.
They had a falling out, definitely.
They had a big falling out, and I believe they haven't spoken to this day after that, I think. I think I'm right.
No.
That's what I heard anyway. So maybe that was it, because nobody seems to know. Obviously, John and Tim do, but nobody seems to know exactly what that fight was about. And maybe that was it. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, equally, there were rumours of Daniel and Sam Mendes not getting on either, wasn't there?
Yeah.
At the end of Spectre, or during Spectre and stuff. So it is interesting. I guess it's better to expand the question to kind of say, if the Bond actors were directed by, other directors, would their performances have been different? I guess that's one way of looking at it, because you hear about how Connery and Terrence Young got on brilliantly and they were like great. Roger Moore and Lewis Gilbert, same sense of humour, got on brilliantly. So it is interesting how I don't think Pierce and Roger Spottiswoode got on very well from what I remember. No. So there are certain times where, the director-star relationship is an important part of the film. And really, you want that to be quite solid, I'd imagine. But yeah, so how much of an effect do you think that has if someone doesn't get on well? Well, okay, let's go back to Simon's question originally, which is, do you think a different director could have gotten more out of Tim and perhaps Timmy's films? And then we'll look at the idea of other directors directing the Bonds.
I would say something like The Living Daylights is quite I don't mean this in any kind of bad way, but it's more of a by-the-numbers Bond film than License to Kill is, purely in comparison, in the sense that in Living Daylights, you've got your typical Q scene, you've got your car chase scene with the lasers coming out of the tyres. It's very like classic Bondian stuff is going on in Living Daylights. But saying by the numbers is by no means, I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying it hits all those touch points. License to Kill, I think out of most of the Bond films, especially the non-Daniels, is the time, and obviously Majesty's as well, is the time when you would really get into a meaty Bondian performance because of the subject matter. You've got a really angry Bond who's going off the rails, and that's like the first time we've ever seen that in the whole series. So I feel like there was ample opportunity to get stuck into some character stuff in there. And that was obviously very important.
Do you think that's missing or not?
I don't think it's missing.
I don't think it's
missing.
I'm trying to...
And I think, like, when you think back to Timmy's take on it, you hear him in interviews all the time, and he's saying, like, it was very important. I was more of a purist about it. That's what he says, doesn't he? Like, I really read all the books and wanted to get back to that, which I think he does a bang up job of, you know? Like, that whole License to Kill thing is almost like, if GoldenEye is a greatest hits of screen Bond style film, that is almost like a greatest hits of Fleming book Bond style film, isn't it? Because you've got all those stories weaved in together.
A lot of it in there,
and there's loads of Fleming stuff in there. So yeah, I don't feel it's lacking in any way. But maybe, who knows what Timmy's process is like or was like, and maybe he did want more or had a slightly different vision for certain things, and John wasn't giving it to him, or whatever. I don't know. Who knows?
There is definitely the case, though, that you get action directors and you get actor directors. And John, obviously, clearly second unit, brought up editing, second unit directing, definitely, heavily into the action. I guess within those, you're not giving much direction to the actors because you're setting up, you're making sure everything's on point for the stunt or whatever action sequence it might be. And someone like Mendes, who was directing, grew up with theatre, done a lot of that. That's purely like an acting, directing sort of style, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you really have to sort of direct the actors. And I imagine that John Glenn style and Sam Mendes style is at polar opposites in terms of how they work with their actors. But then conversely, it does depend on the actor. So there are some actors which love the fact that the director says, here's the scene. I'm confident enough that I know that you're going to pull something out of the bag and it's going to be amazing. Like Samuel L. Jackson, you don't tell him how to direct. He turns up, he does what he wants for that scene, and that's what ends up in the film. Whereas other actors need to be directed. And even though they could be some of the best actors in the world, they like to be told what's needed. And that then they can build on that. And with Tim being this sort of method actor and like really delving deeply into it, you can see why he's the sort of actor that needs that information coming in so he knows that he's working with something. Yeah. And I guess from the point of view of John Glenn's style, that's where they sort of clashed. And I'm sure Simon's right. And I'm sure that's, pretty much what happened. But in terms of, say, an actor's director did it instead, I still don't know how different it would be, because Tim still gives, he gives a solid that sort of performance that's intense and passionate and powerful. So yeah, it would be hard to imagine how it would change the actual performance, but I think it's an interesting idea, just thinking about how different directorial styles might have influenced the actors had they worked with someone else. It's an interesting point.
John Glenn said when we interviewed him, he was saying he thinks License to Kill is the best film that he made, and I imagine definitely. He's including non-Bonds in that as well. But yeah, I guess maybe there is a kind of thing when you're working that closely with somebody, especially with the Bond, because I feel like it goes the director and then Bond, whoever's playing Bond is like, those are the two absolute key players in the whole piece, aren't they? So, although
maybe that might have flipped in recent movies.
Yes, absolutely. It's Bond and then whoever's directing these days. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Bond's well and truly in charge by the sounds of things. But nice question, Simon. Good stuff. Now, next up, we have a question from Trip Pearson.
Hey boys, Trip Pearson here from Rochester, New York in the US of A. I've been listening to the podcast since the beginning, and I have to say it is absolutely glorious. Nothing brings a smile to my face faster than seeing a brand new episode waiting for me, so keep up the good work. But the reason for the call is that I think that Pierce Brosnan is the most underrated James Bond of all time. I think he was unfortunately saddled with some terrible American actresses that were Bond girls during his tenure, some bad writing, and some really unfortunate music cues. I also think, though, that Pierce Brosnan is the only actor to have played James Bond that could have played James Bond in any of the movies that have ever been released. I don't think Daniel or Timmy could do the humor of the Roger Moore era. Roger, by his own admission, was not a clone of Sean Connery and couldn't really have pulled that off. And let's be honest, George, I know you guys have a soft spot for George, but George cannot act. I love him because I love the movie, but we have to be honest. What are your thoughts? Pierce Brosnan could have played James Bond in every single movie.
I can hear Sheila's blood boiling from here.
I know.
Good God.
I know.
He's asking for trouble there as old Trip. That's a
Yeah.
bloody good question, actually. And
It really is,
And some very positive thoughts. I've got some very definitive thoughts, definitive in my own mind, that is, about The World Is Not Enough when we finally get to that.
Okay.
So I'm going to give a very short preview of it. I'm very much looking forward to reviewing that one, actually.
Me too.
Which is, I think Pierce, in that film, shows signs of being quite possibly, it's hard when you compare it, but like there's that moment when he shoots Sophie Marceau at point blank range in the face. And I'm like, that is about as dark as it gets as an action for a character to take on screen. And for some reason, the fact that she is a beautiful woman as well makes it even harder, because it's like, oh, what a waste. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I thought you were going on about the fact that she seduced him and had power over him.
Yeah.
But no. Just the fact she was hot.
Indeed. There is that. But also what you said as well. Yeah. I mean, that is like, when you compare that to something like Bond shooting Professor Dent all the way back in Dr. No, that's like a cold-blooded death right there. But somewhat less so because Dent tried to shoot him. Obviously, he already had his 6, so that wasn't going to happen. But ultimately, Dent tries to shoot him, and then Dent is defenseless. Bang, bang, bang. He's dead, right? In this case, she is obviously, I know she's trying to, doing the thing with the walkie-talkie and stuff, which could cause some problems, but she's essentially a defenseless woman, and he shoots her in the face, which tells me, I think Pierce could have gone way darker. If he'd have been given the material to do a really dark Bond, I think he could have gone there. I really do. And I think Trip's question is a bloody good one, because it's making me think now, as he was asking that. And I'm like, do you know what? I think he might have a point there. Like, there's not a Bond film. The one that sticks out to me that I would say would be the most jarring would be License to Kill, because it's that different. But I don't feel like it would be beyond Pierce's abilities.
Could you see him do Majesties?
That's a different it's tricky because the films are so different in terms of style. If you just plant Pierce in it, it would look weird because he's a man from a completely different time and generation. But that story, I feel like there's a tenderness to Pierce that like we often say, the thing George did in Majesties, I don't think I could see Sean pulling it off at the end, because I never felt Sean could be vulnerable. He was always just this badass dude, and that's fine, that's great. But that scene, the real tenderness that George shows, and Trip, I totally get what you're saying about George, but dude, he fucking sells that scene 100%. I don't care what anybody says.
Definitely.
And I could definitely see Pierce has a tenderness to him as well, I think, that could have done that. I feel like Pierce's later movies were more or less Roger style films, so I feel like he could have done that whole period pretty well.
What about the Daniels? Do you think Pierce and some of the Daniels?
Yeah, I feel like if I imagine Pierce at his prime and sort of adjust him for the times a little bit, like cut the hair so it's a little bit more in with the times and stuff. Like the GoldenEye hair was probably a bit too long for Quantum of Solace. Yeah, you know what I mean? I feel like he could pull it off. Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting question, because there are definite, like, you would never put Roger in Majesties. That just would not ever work. You probably wouldn't put Roger in License to Kill either. You know, and fair point about George's range. Obviously, as an untrained actor, you know, it maybe with a few years and a bit more practice, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, what are your thoughts? I've rambled on for long enough now.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great observation, to be honest. And I guess one way of looking at it is to look at the reverse and to say, well, could any of the other actors have been in all the Bond films? And like you said, it's tricky, you know. Roger perhaps not, and Sean perhaps not, and Daniel perhaps not, and obviously George and Tim perhaps not. So Pierce, I guess if you had like a scale from humor from lighthearted through to the darkest dark, and I had the actors along that scale, I think Pierce would be bang in the middle. And you could easily slide him up towards the dark end. You could easily slide him towards the light-heart end. But he is the closest from all the actors to be bang in the middle, but have the scope to go either end. And I guess that's exactly what Trip is saying. And I would say that's definitely the case. I think with Daniel, there is that humour side to him, which we saw in Spectre, and obviously it wasn't really in many of the earlier movies. It was a bit in Casino as well, which I thought was good. So he did have a bit more scope for that. But I think Pierce is probably the closest one to being sort of one that could cover all bases, I guess.
So, yeah, I think we've seen a glimpse of Daniel doing the humour in Spectre. And I thought going into Spectre, before Spectre that is, that just wasn't his thing. I felt a lot of the humour in Skyfall didn't land for me. It felt a bit forced. And I'm just like, let's not do that with Daniel, because for me, that just doesn't feel right. Let's just have him be moody or whatever. Spectre came along and I'm like, shit, he actually can do it. I'm very happy with that.
Partly to do with the script as well, you got to say.
Absolutely, completely, indeed. But I would also say I would never want to see Daniel do a really light-hearted Bond film. You know what I mean? GoldenEye is much lighter than I remember it being when we revisited it recently. And I don't want to see Daniel do a light Bond like that. I don't think that would suit him. However, I was wrong before, so who knows? I would say the one other possibility is, let's look at Sean Connery, right? Because he can obviously do A Diamonds Are Forever. He can obviously do, I suppose, the darkest it would get for him would be something like a Dr. No.
Russia, maybe?
Or like, for me, Dr. No, Killing of Dent is super dark. That bit where he comes into Miss Trench's house, he's got the towel wrapped around his knuckles and he looks like he's about to strangle her. Like, I feel like that's as much of dark Bond as we see from Sean. And I feel like if I cast my minds back and imagine Sean, as hard as it is because of the different generations there, Sean in a sort of a License to Kill style film, I would really want to see that. I think he could do it. You know, I think he could. Yeah. But I don't know. What do you think? I think Pierce, yes, and I think Sean could probably do it as well. I think. Yeah.
No, I think so because he's got the look, hasn't he? Like he can turn himself into an evil looking and powerful person, Connery. So I think you're right. I think he could definitely do that, but he might still have that vulnerability, that lack of vulnerability, which Tim still has in License to Kill. Even though he's dark and gritty, he still has a bit of vulnerability. George obviously had that as well, and maybe that's the one part of Connery that he didn't have for Bond, because maybe it was because that's how Bond was in the 60s when it came out. But I think perhaps from his performance, he might still be able to bring it on, but it's something that we haven't seen basically in Sean's Bond, I don't think. Whereas it covers pretty much everything else. Absolutely. So I think I would agree with you though that out of the others, Sean would be the closest to basically covering the other films as well, I think.
And I tell you what, something important to note also, there. Go on.
Yeah, Roger can do dark as well. Let's not forget For Your Eyes Only classic kicking off. True. Both Octopussy and A View to a Kill, as light as some people think they are, have some really dark moments in it. And Bond, there are some dark moments with Roger's later Bond, which people sometimes overlook. And I know, obviously we don't see him do the quite depths of License to Kill, but I still think he could play that. Yeah, he's always said, he's a light-hearted, humorous guy, but Roger had range as well, more than people give him credit for, I think.
That's a good point. Absolutely. I tell you what, though, Sean and Pierce, both hairy-chested men. Maybe there is something in it.
There we go.
Who knows?
This is it. Yeah, I'm going to start growing mine now.
All right, coolio. Let's move on to our next question.
Hey, Tom and Chris. It's Don Zuiderman calling in from the Netherlands. So now there are 24 official Eon Bond films, and there have been 6 Bond actors. Now, I know you guys like the what-if scenario, so here's one for you. What if you divide the 24 films equally over the 6 actors? In other words, every actor can only play in 4 Bond films. So Sean had to stop after Thunderball, and George would have played Bond from You Only Live Twice through to Live and Let Die. Then Roger took over, starting with The Man with the Golden Gun and ended on For Your Eyes Only. Then Timothy's first would have been Octopussy, and the rest of the films would have been as is. And in addition, do you think it would be better if every Bond actor actually can only play in 4 films before things tend to start getting too silly and fantastical? Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Cheers, guys, and keep up the good work.
Nice one, Don. That's a good question.
Yeah, cheers,
right?
Don.
And I will tell you, here's some thoughts that immediately come to my mind.
Okay.
And it's in a slightly different format, in the sense that when you watch a long-running TV series, right, typically, say something runs for 8 seasons or 10 seasons, something like that, typically by the time you hit season 5 or 6, things definitely take a dip in terms of quality. And one of the things I loved about Breaking Bad so much, which is still my greatest TV series of all time, bar none, by a long way.
Band of Brothers?
That was a very good one. I look at that more of a mini series though, rather than because it was multiple seasons. With Breaking Bad is that they immediately set out to make 5 seasons of Breaking Bad. That was the story arc, and that was going to be it. They weren't going to drag it out. And then a perfect example on the flip side of that is Dexter, which I really loved for about 4 seasons, maybe 5 at a push, and then it turned to absolute raging dog shit on such a massive level after that. So much so I still haven't seen the final season of it, because I heard from friends that it was that bad, that it was so awful. And I do think maybe there is something to be said for it, and it typically comes for me, in my experience, around the 5th season is like the last bit of quality. Maybe that applies to Bond as well, in the sense that if you've got a run of 5 films, I know obviously we're saying 4 there, like that's a good stretch of time to like have a stab at Bond without trying to stretch things a little bit too far, for example. Like I would, as much as I love all the Bonds, when you look at Sean and his run, I don't think anybody would disagree with me saying that the first 4 Sean films are absolutely top drawer, bang out of the park, amazing Bond films, untouchable, right? And then when you hit You Only Live Twice, that's where, as great as it is, there are definitely, that's the first one where you see some like some chin scratching moments on what they did with that one. You know, perfect example is the whole taking him up in the plane just to parachute out and kill him when she had him at knife point 30 seconds before. Just like things like that. They go, huh. And, you know, obviously by that point, Sean had slightly had enough, and he wasn't as virile as he once was. You look at him in Dr. No through to Thunderbolt, especially Goldfinger. I think he was his absolute prime in that one. It's like, it is a bit of a dip in terms of when you compare it to that, for me. And then, of course, when you look at Diamonds Are Forever, where he's obviously been eating a few too many donuts and he's kind of just past care, and it's kind of like, and as much as I love that film, it's, you compare it to Goldfinger, which is like absolute perfection, or, you know, From Russia with Love, or whichever one's your favorite. Maybe there's something to be said for that there is a finite amount of time when perhaps you should say, you've got your run, do your best with that time, then step aside for the next dude. Because there have been several times now when it's been sorely needed that reboot has been needed with the next dude to just usher it on. So I think there's some truth to that. Again, I've rambled on for ages. So what are your thoughts?
No, I think it's all interesting stuff. I think the idea of like the 4-film limit is the trouble is the time scale is changed so rapidly in the last 15 years, so to speak. So basically back in the 60s, bashing them out every year. You got every couple of years for the majority of the 70s and the 80s. And then you hit the 6-year hiatus again, later 90s, every couple of years. And then you get it gets that little bit longer in the wait. You, obviously 2002, 2006, you had 2 years, 2008 is not too bad. And then another stretch before Skyfall, then another stretch before Spectre, and now an even bigger stretch before Bond 25. So there is that huge amount of time. So, you know, previously a 4-film thing could have been 4 years, you know, or 5 or 6 years. And now you're looking at a minimum of 12 years or something like that, maybe 10 to 12 years minimum. Yeah. So there is that to think about. And like, there's no way that the future Bond films are going to go back to 1 a year or even 1 every 2 years. I think 1 every 3 years is going to be the sort of shortest amount of time, unless it goes all conglomerate and Disney chucks, you know, 50 billion at it or whatever to bust one out every year. So there is that aspect. But I do agree that, but then there is, there's also the bit of the charm of, I know you talk about Diamonds and You Only Live Twice, and equally with Roger, if you look at some of the later things, obviously he was, you know, his age was progressing, he was a bit long in the tooth, so to speak, but they're still great films, and he still brought magic to those films. So I don't know, you know, it's a hard one to call for me.
There is definitely a journey. I suppose the easiest thing that I could compare it to, there's definitely a journey in terms of like, when you look at a band, there have been bands that I've really loved over the years that have released maybe 2 albums back to back, or not back to back, but like over the course of 2 albums, for me personally, they've been absolutely perfect, and I've loved every single song on them. And then for the 3rd album, they try something a little bit different, and they perhaps lose me a little bit, and then, you know, it kind of goes off in a different direction or whatever. And I just think that's the natural journey of things. Perfect example of that is something like the Beatles. Like, you compare them at the beginning to at the end, they might as well be a totally different band. You know what I mean? They're a completely different animal. And that is the one constant of the universe, is that change always happens. And it's just, you can't, if you're the sort of person that just wants the Beatles to just make those early mop top kind of hits and not explore any other avenues, then you're kind of holding on to something that is just going to degrade all the time, because you're just going to do less good versions of that thing. And then, but exploring the new thing, again, something like David Bowie is another perfect example of somebody who was always pushing forward and trying new things. So I think there is that thing. And ultimately, the ultimate destiny is that we are all ultimately going to be disappointed with a Bond's journey and a Bond's film across the way, because they could come out with something like Casino Royale, which for me is absolute perfection. And then a couple of years later, they come out with Quantum of Solace, which I've grown to love a lot more since I first saw it. But for me, it's like, I mean, that's not a good example, because there were outside factors that made that not the film it perhaps should have been. You know, writer's strike and all that kind of stuff. If it had a bit more time on the old cooker, I think we'd have had a different result there. But yeah, so a perfect example for me then is the difference between Casino and Skyfall. Like, because of the whole Spectre story building up, though it was Quantum in those days, obviously. I was so ready for them to explore that. The Spectre meeting in Quantum is a brilliant scene. Love it. Then when that was sort of like sidestepped in Skyfall, I was so ready for that storyline, and the fact that it wasn't that, I was like, fuck, I'm really gutted. And I didn't really enjoy Skyfall all that much when it first came out. Then Spectre came along and I'm like, yeah, that was the story I wanted. It's a natural thing. There are going to be things that you do like and you don't like on an actor's journey. And I think the very thing that they perhaps shouldn't do is just trot out 5 versions of the same thing. Like if they just used Casino Royale as a template and trotted that out 5 times, the quality of that is definitely going to go down with each film. It's going to be a slightly less good version of it the second time because the first one was perfection. The third one's going to be even worse because you're trying to regurgitate the same old ideas and try and do something. It's just going to go the wrong way. So at some point, you do have to have Bond in space or something, I think. And I do think that is testament to why Bond has lasted so long, because you have that natural cycle. You start off, you nearly always go back to the core roots of the Fleming. And then by the end of it, you've got spaceships and you've got invisible cars and all the rest of it. And that's how you introduce the new dude, because if you're just trotting out the same thing every time, then surely it's just going to run out of steam before too long.
Because there is that argument that obviously Daniel's tenure has had a lot of fans, quite a few who weren't happy with Spectre because of the change, and they just wanted it to remain eternally gritty and dark and rogue and all that.
Yeah.
And I think it could have been done. It could have stayed that way if it had, just been for Craig. So, Spectre could have remained dark, and perhaps his next one could have remained dark. But you couldn't have the next actor come in and then do another dark, rogue, gritty Bond, and then the next one do another dark, because you're missing out on loads of other areas of Bond which make the character brilliant, which haven't really been looked at during that particular
each
time.
actor has to put their own flavour to it as well.
Stamp on it.
Because
exactly,
in the same way, if George had turned up and just copied Connery in every way, and if Roger had showed up and just copied Connery in every way, all you're going to get is a cheap and nasty version of Connery, and it's going to degrade with every attempt. Whereas if you compare Connery's Goldfinger to Roger's Spy Who Loved Me, they're very different beasts, but still the essence of Bond is there, but with a different flavour. They're equally as valid and equally as cool in my book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
definitely,
and you do. I feel like you do need to explore those different versions. And like I recently learned, didn't I, when we revisited GoldenEye, I was like, you know what? I would have said my favourite kind of Bond is the darker and gritty Flemings, but actually, I think my favourite is the slightly lighter-hearted ones. The GoldenEyes and the Roger films are the ones I put on more than any other for some reason. I guess that's what it is.
Because you're a nice, light-hearted guy.
Maybe
Tom,
that's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But,
you're not a moody sourpuss.
Yeah, maybe not. No, well, when it comes around to reviewing Die Another Day, I will be. You will see me go full Timothy when we do that one. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting one. I do think, like we said before, like I feel like if you put Timothy in For Your Eyes Only, I could see that working really well, like a younger Timothy.
Actually, I've got a question which is going to lead into this. Okay, so it's a bit of a flip on what Don was saying. So we've got the Bond actors, but they were only allowed to make 4 films. So obviously Daniel's got his 4, Pierce's got his 4. Between Connery, George, Tim, and Roger, would you? I'm taking it with Sean. You just give him the first 4 Seans.
100%.
Yes. Okay. So from You Only Live Twice through to A View to a Kill. Sorry, through to License to Kill. How would you mix and match 4 films for Roger?
So you mean
George,
I can mix and match like throughout?
Yes.
They don't have to be in chronology.
Yeah.
So
for instance, Tim could have For Your Eyes Only added to the 2 that he's done.
Yeah. I would do that.
I would do that. Yes.
I think what I would do is I would almost do chronological for Tim. I'd go For Your Eyes Only, A View to a Kill, Living Daylights, License to Kill.
Okay, for Tim, that's good. Okay.
I think that's.
And what 4 for Roger then?
4 for Roger, I think it's got to be Spy Who Loved Me because that is his signature film. But the thing is, though, I do really enjoy seeing the darker side of Roger come out in For Your Eyes Only, and it would be robbing him of that by sticking Tim in it.
It's tricky, isn't it?
But then the dark thing is Tim's thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like if anybody's going to do that well, it would be the dude whose thing is that. So for Tim, then for Roger, I think you've got to have him in Spy. You've got to have him in Octopussy. You've got to have him in Moonraker.
Okay, and one more, Live and Let Die or Golden Gun.
I love Live and Let Die so much, and I also love The Man with the Golden Gun so much. And I'd be, I love it when he makes Goodnight sit in a wardrobe, and it would pain me to not see that. Maybe I don't need him in Moonraker. Maybe
George could do.
Maybe George could do Moonraker. I'm going to have Roger in Live and Let Die and Golden Gun, Spy, and Octopussy, I think, is Roger's run.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so that leaves George with You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, which is good because then you've got Majesties and Diamonds.
Yeah.
And what was the other one for George?
Moonraker, wasn't it? Did you say that?
Moonraker, yeah. So do you know what? I think that actually is pretty damn good because I think the Dalton ones work out really well. The Rogers are all great. And the George would work well with the Diamonds from Majesties. So him in You Only Live Twice, it's different, but it'd be there. So I think you're about spot on.
I suppose actually. The question is that with 4 films, personally, I think I would like 5, but 4 films, if we're playing by Don's rules there, I think you've got room for that each actor to just deliver the absolute best of the best. And there to not be any that sit on that slightly lower tier. For me, for Connery, You Only Live Twice sits on a slightly lower tier than the first 4, and Diamonds Are Forever again sits on a slightly lower tier. So with 4 films, you just get that they fire out absolute top draw A-class quality every time. Maybe there's something in that.
Maybe, but either way. Great question.
Yeah, that was a good one. Oh, that got me thinking. That alternative universe Bond, which is always very exciting to think about, isn't it? All righty ho then. Next question is this one.
Hi, Tom and Chris. This is JBR agent Frank McNeely from Tacoma, Washington in the U.S. And thinking about Bond 25, something popped into my mind. So, in Casino Royale, Bond ends up hooking up with Solange, a married woman. Then in that same film, when he's talking to Vesper Lynd when they're on their way to the casino, Bond says that his type is not the single ladies. And then later on in Spectre, he ends up with Monica Bellucci for a short while, even though she wasn't married when they connected at the time. She was, as a result of Bond essentially bumping off her husband, so technically she's widowed. So my question is, for Bond 25, do you think that they will have Daniel Craig with another married woman, or do you think that they'll continue that narrative of Bond preferring married women with the new guy after Daniel leaves? I'm very curious. Love the podcast. Hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Nice one, Frank. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, interesting observation that. So I guess there's definitely something behind that in terms of Daniel's Bond being a bit more into the married women or the taken woman, so to speak. It's a sort of thing where, I guess before, if you're looking back at the Connerys or the Rogers, it's never really alluded to all that often whether they're married or not, and it's just a case of having a bit of a fling. So I guess that's something that's comes out a bit more with the Daniel films. It's not. I don't know if it's a definite thing. Maybe it is a thing for Daniels, but I don't see that as being a characterization of the character of Bond himself. But perhaps with Daniel's Bond, it is something that perhaps they've thought about, or something that is part of his version of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I reference this quite a lot, but I remember years ago I was at a screening and Tom Mankiewicz was there, and he talked about a very similar thing, that when you write for Bond, he was talking about writing for someone like Sean versus Roger, and he was saying the absolute core, even though you've got 2 very different styles of person there, that the absolute core thing, that Bond has to be a bit of a prick. Like those were his exact words. Like he said, he's got to be a bit of a prick, and you wouldn't trust him with your wife like that. And I'm like, there is some truth to that, because it's getting back to that. This is the first question of Bond being a bit of a womanizer and stuff. That is just part of his character. That it just is who he is. And I think the whole married woman thing, yeah, I can imagine. I could imagine. I close my eyes and I can think of Sean and Roger and all the rest of them cracking onto a married woman. Do you know what I mean? It just is. Yeah. There's that level of flirtation, which you see that in GoldenEye, like that scene with Xenia. Obviously, she's not a married woman, but they're sitting across the casino, and there's just that back and forth flirtation going on between the two of them, and that for me is an essential part of Bond. I need that from him, and when that happens, I just break out into a huge grin because I'm like, oh, you old devil. You know what I mean? It's that thing. It's that energy that you need in Bond. So yeah, and I think obviously the Casino Royale thing, when he actually says, you know, she's not his type or whatever, it makes a lot of sense. And I do smile at that line. I think that's great. I'm like, yeah, that's the old Bond that we've known all these years. You know, he's just a bit of a bastard when it comes to that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's got to be an element of naughtiness to Bond. You can't have a Bond that just plays by the rules. You know what I mean? Then he just becomes this
so much. Then
he's just this muted little sort of like errand boy.
Muted is a great word. That's a muted is a perfect word to describe it. If it sort of becomes stripped from all these different assets of the aspects of his character, sort of thing. That's a perfect sort of word to describe it, and that is what would happen, I think, if it was. Yeah, I suppose
the key differentiation of that, if that's the right word to use, it's probably not, is that there are things in the older films. I don't want to see Bond backhanding a girl like you've done in recent years. That's not cool. Like maybe there's an argument that that's a key part of the character from Fleming, but. That to me is not something I want to see. I don't go, yeah, Bond, when he slaps a woman around back in the day. Do you know what I mean? And I hope nobody else does as well, because that's just a bit nasty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas ultimately, at our roots, dudes just, you know, that's the ultimate dream for a man. Let's flip it on its head. If you asked a woman what her ultimate dream is, it's probably not going to be, I would like to be surrounded by naked men, right? You've probably got a few of them, right? There's probably a few ladies out there who would be into that. But typically speaking, for the vast majority, that probably wouldn't be the answer you get. Whereas if you ask dudes, that would probably be hey, Chris, I've got a room full of naked ladies over here. Do you want to come over and hang out? Yeah. You would be.
Are we still recording?
Like the door would already be wide open, and there'd just be dust hanging in the air. You know what I mean? And I just think that's just a root truth of things. You know, as much as some people wouldn't want to hear that, I think that is that is just one of the key differences. So yeah, and I think that is a key part. And if he's going to be, and again, it's not like it's promoting that everybody should then go out and sleep with as many married women as they possibly can. But that's one of the entertaining things about Bond is he's a bit of a bastard and he's a naughty boy, and that's a big reason why it's entertaining to watch.
And equally, that's fueled something that I realise I've been missing, is that I kind of want the next incarnation of Bond to be a bastard. I know I've said this before, and like when I was thinking of Aidan Turner, I knew that he could really pull it off. Fassbender, he won't be Bond, but he could have pulled it off. But I want the next character of Bond to be a bit cruel and maybe a slight, like, again, not in a women beating way, but just something that perhaps we haven't quite seen, just a darker side to his character, but not necessarily darker in terms of gritty revenge. Just things where you think, oh, that's a bit cold, but you know, it's still ingrained within the character type.
He'll break any heart without regret. It's in the song, you know. It's just, it is that. So yeah, I've actually forgotten what Frank's question was now. It was something about married women. We've gone off on a tangent again.
But I think it's all valid, though. Yeah. I think it's all valid. Yeah. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We'll have to keep a lookout for any married women in the next one then. Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. Splendid. Who have we got up next? So our last MI6 mailbag question of the day is from Mr. Dalton Fisher.
Hey, Tom and Chris, it's Dalton from Arizona. We've been talking lately about what kind of actors might play James Bond in the coming years, but I was curious who you think might be a good Bond villain for the next few years. Obviously, they're probably going to come back with Christoph Waltz again for the next one. But in the future, who do you think might have the right kind of look, be of the right kind of stature? I think after seeing Hugh Laurie in The Night Manager, he'd be a great Bond villain. But, I mean, that's Night Manager Bond, that's pretty close. They might not want someone quite so on the nose. I think Ricky Jay, I know he was already in Tomorrow Never Dies, so he's probably not going to use him again. I think he was underutilized in that movie. But now that he's getting older, he can have a real menacing look to him that I think would look really good for a villain. And he's acted a million times before. I think Mandy Patinkin, he's got a good look. I don't know if he's quite on the level of playing a Bond villain. I don't know if he's quite that stature. But maybe. And then last, I really want this to happen. I think Tony Shalhoub from Monk. I know he might not be quite on the level of Bond, but I think he's a great actor and he has a real good Bond villain look to him. So let me know what you think. I'm really curious. Thanks, guys. I really love the show.
Nice one, Dalton.
Right.
There are some names he's firing out there that I'm like, right, I'm going to just get on the Googles there and have a little look at that.
Yeah. Before we do that, I think first we need to address our Dalton's name. So Dalton Fisher.
Why?
So we've got
Why do we
Tim
need to talk
Dalton.
about that?
We've got Mr. Fisher.
Oh, yeah.
We've got loads of different Bond sort of things you can take. Now, Tom, if you were not to be called Tom, and you had to be called, your first name was a surname from one of the Bonds, obviously then Sears, you kept Sears, what would you choose as your first name? Would you be Connery Sears? Would you be Lazenby Sears? Moore Sears? Dalton Sears? Brosnan Sears? Or Craig Sears is a bit too normal. But yeah, what would you be?
I'd probably go Moore, because then it's like,
More Sears.
You want some
Roger
more of this,
Moore
don't you?
Sears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What about you?
Like it. Connery Wright. More right. More is good. Lazenby right. Lazenby is quite cool, I think. Yeah.
You'd sound quite posh
right,
with a name like
work.
that. I think that posh
Lazenby
people have that
Wright.
thing where they almost have two last names, don't they? You know?
I think Lazenby
Arlington
Wright.
Beach.
I'm going to go.
It's like that
Beach.
kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, okay. So what I've done is, or actually, let's go through some of the names that Dalton mentioned first, and then I've got a list of names I'd like to reel off to see what you think. But let's go with the ones that Dalton listed first. So what do you think? I know you've been on the Googles trying to get their pictures up and stuff.
So Mandy Patinkin, that's the first gentleman I've ever seen with the name Mandy. I didn't know you could do that. But I know that face. I don't know what he's in off the top of my head, but I've just Googled him and I know that face. I've definitely seen him before, and he definitely looks villainous for sure. He could definitely do that.
He's the bearded dude, is he?
He's the bearded dude, absolutely. Yeah.
That's right.
So, by the looks of it, he's in Homeland, so that's where to check him out, I guess. But yeah, 100% I could see that. Tony Shalhoub, I enjoy that name. I could see that as well. That is Monk, isn't it? I remember Monk. Yeah, that is Monk.
Sure.
But looking at him in more recent times, he looks quite villainous as well. I feel like he could pull off something like that. Yeah, interesting shouts. Those are names that I would never have thought of.
No,
but they're very much like those actors. There's an army of those actors, aren't there? That you know their face, but you don't know their name. You've seen them in a million things, but you could never name them, but you know you've seen him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess. With the Craig ones, they've been trying to go for some of the big hitters, haven't they? With the Christoph Waltz, Javier Bardems, and stuff like that. So, it's a great question, Dalton. Who would make a good Bond villain? I mean, there are so many potentials out there who we're not even thought about or considering or seen, perhaps. And what Eon are always good at is finding sometimes these unknown actors who might have only done one or two things, but they're bloody brilliant.
Yeah.
And then they come on board. Like Mads Mikkelsen had obviously done some stuff before, but clearly not as much in the English speaking world. And he comes up and throws in that performance of Le Chiffre, and you're like, bloody hell, that's amazing. You know, it's so good. And Eon are brilliant at doing that. But in terms of sort of the well-known faces, I've got a few names here.
Go on then.
And I'd just like to do the yes, the no, the maybe with you.
All right.
And see what you think.
Okay, give it to me.
Now, some of these names have cropped up before, okay? So we'll see what you think. So we're going to start with Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, she's very villainous looking. She would be like a great Irma Bunt or something, something along those lines. I feel like she'd be the ultimate sort of like wicked queen from a Disney story or something. Do you know what I mean?
Which she has done before.
Yeah, I'm sure she has. Yeah, she's would make a fantastic Bond villain. I feel like they need some kind of stature as well. Like they need like an element of superiority, and I would be intimidated to talk to Tilda. Do you know what I mean? I'd be like, fucking hell, I don't want to get on the wrong side of her. Do you know what I mean? That kind of vibe.
That is what you need, isn't it?
Completely.
Definitely. Okay, what about Sam Rockwell?
Nah, I like him. I think he's fantastic, but I don't see him as a Bond villain, really.
Willem Dafoe?
He's a very good villain, isn't he?
him.
Yeah, immediately I think of him in Spider-Man. Was it the first Spider-Man he was in?
Yeah, it was the first one.
But
he's done a lot of good stuff, and he has got that good evil look to him as well.
He does, yeah. I don't know whether he's sort of too... I like there being a slightly unknown element about them. Like, I don't know if Willem Dafoe is too much of like a sort of known face. Like in the same way that you knew Javier Bardem, you knew his face, but he was a slightly... to me anyway, he didn't feel like a big... Even though he is like a big A-list sort of like a Jack Nicholson type or something. Do you know what I mean? There was something a bit mysterious about him that you sort of you didn't know a lot about him,
I think the hair has something to do with that. The hair and the costumes were fantastic, I think, in that respect. Okay, what about Michael Shannon? Do you know Michael Shannon?
He was Zod, wasn't he, in Man of Steel? Is that him?
Yeah, he was actually. Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
he's got a good evil look to him. Actually,
he's a good shout. Actually, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see him pulling that off. Yeah. Is he British or is he American or was he?
I think he's American. I think
is he?
Michael Shannon.
Right,
but
cool.
if you have a little Googles and have a quick look, but he's got a definitely sort of that sort of face and look, and also he's quite a good stature to him, like you said. What about Viggo Mortensen?
Yes, yeah. We talked about that recently, didn't we? In our sort of Bond 25 roundup, it was his brother came up or something, wasn't it? Was it his brother? Oh no, it was Mads' brother.
Someone else. Mads' Lars Mikkelsen, who's on this little list as well.
Yeah, I feel like he could do the job. He could. I think he could definitely pull something off. Yeah.
Now this next name is someone who I think would be amazing if he ever gets into a Bond film as a Bond villain. Joaquin Phoenix. I think he could definitely pull one off.
He's an evil-looking bastard, isn't he? I'll give you that.
And he's a top-notch actor as well. He's a brilliant actor, and he can look and be pretty evil. I think he'd be quite a twisted sort of villain.
Do you know what I think I need in my villains? I think I need them to at least in their performance be non-American. I think there's something to be said about the Bond villain having some sort of accent, and knowing Fleming sort of had some questionable beliefs in his day, to say the least, didn't he? And that was almost like a key part. They had to be a bit foreign and a bit like have some sort of deformity or something that was just outside of the main box of normalness in his mind.
Yes, yeah. But I guess people can do accents. That's true. Okay, Rachel Weisz. Evil villainess.
No, as much as that would be funny, I don't want that in a million years.
No. I don't think so. Now, this next guy I quite like, Oscar Isaac. I think he's a damn good actor, and he could do something with the material.
Poe Dameron. Yeah, he was in
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina. Yeah, I thought he was wicked in that. Yeah, he's one of those really good younger dude, but quite intense, and he could do Nutter quite well, I think. Yeah. So that's a good shout, actually. Definitely. A little bit, because it's funny to think of a younger dude being a villain, but I think that could be quite interesting. Yeah.
Okay, now on to a recognisable name here. What about Idris Elba as a potential Bond villain?
I would like to see that. Yeah, I think if anything, it would just put those rumours to bed. You know what I mean? If I could see, what I would like to see from Idris is I would like to see a real physical match for Bond, in the sense that not like a Hinks, because
another
Hinks
sort of 006, 007
exactly
sort of style
that.
Where they're level pegging.
Yeah, exactly that. That was exactly what I was going to say. Is like when you look at somebody like Hinks, he outmatches Bond physically, and Bond has to use his wits to kind of keep up. Whereas I feel like something like Idris, I feel like it would be like a Red Grant type situation. You know what I mean? Or a 006, like you say. And I would love to see that. I think that would be really good.
And he would like pull it off as well.
Yeah,
completely.
big time.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. How about Paul Bettany?
He was in the Solo movie, wasn't he? Han Solo. And I thought
he was indeed.
I thought he was really good in that. He made like a really good villain. He's got that upper class British kind of vibe about him. And
a bit Julian Glover-esque out of comparable to previous Bond villains.
I think that character he played in Solo almost had a bit of Bond villain in him. Obviously not physically to look at, but he almost had like those scars on him and shit, didn't he? It was almost like that kind of thing. So, yeah, I could see that. That's a good shout.
Okay. What about this one? Now, this name obviously was connected with a Bond film back in '97. What about Anthony Hopkins? Do you think it's a bit past it now?
I don't know what he looks like these days. I don't know whether he'd be too old.
He's in Westworld.
He's
in Westworld, isn't he?
But I think there was definitely he's like the ultimate villain. You look at Hannibal Lecter and like, he's right up there he's got to be top 10 classic movie villains of all time. He can do Nutter very well. And I think that would be, I think that would be a good shout. I don't know if it's too late for that now. I don't know whether I don't know what kind of shape he's in these days. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he's still pretty damn good on Westworld, but there's not a lot of movement, I guess, but he's still cracking in that. Now, this one's a bit of a left field choice, but someone I watched quite recently. What about Rami Malek? So he played Freddie Mercury in the Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. He's a very intense dude. I think that would, thinking about that, I think that would be a very good shout. I saw first season of Mr. Robot, and he does weird very well. He's like a real weird dude.
Weird
in that.
Is good.
Yeah, he's got like an intense look about him as well. So I think that ticks
good
that
eyes,
box.
Hasn't he?
He's got good eyes.
Those sort of eyes.
The sort of dude where you don't know what he's thinking. I think he could be. Again, he's quite young, so that's again a bit different. I'm guessing he's similar sort of age to Oscar Isaac. I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably about
he does creepy and weird very well. I think that could be a very good shout, actually. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, interesting.
Nice one. Yeah, I think so. He was brilliant in Bohemian Rhapsody anyway. So what about actually, this is potentially a bit of a crazy choice. What about Frances McDermott?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
She's three billboards outside of Missouri or whatever. Did you see that?
No.
She's in all the Coen brothers films.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Oh, actually, great actress.
There's a picture
and
here.
She can look.
The first one that came up in Google search isn't a million miles away from a Bunt-like look for her from whatever film that is she's in. I feel like she's a nice looking lady. She looks friendly, but in some of these roles I'm looking at here, she could be made up to look really nasty. And I feel like she could be like a Kleb type or a Bunt type quite easily. That's a good shout, man, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another sort of left field one, I thought. Okay, on to another name that's been touted for a few years. What about Gary Oldman? He's in a lot of things.
But he's brilliant. He is brilliant. I don't know whether he's one of those names that's a bit too... I think I might have seen him in too many things.
Yeah.
And him be...
I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean by that? It's kind of... I need a little bit of mystery about him. And like, if I look back at some of the choices that you've just said, like, you know, your Tilda Swintons and stuff, obviously she's a very big name as well, but she's a bit sort of in the shadows a little bit in terms of I don't know a lot about her, you know, whereas with this dude, I don't know. Obviously he could do it really well because he's a brilliant actor, but I just don't know whether he fits my mind of what I want to see from a Bond villain.
So you mentioned previously about Bond being up against a villain and they're quite level pegging. What would you think about potentially Christian Bale? Or do you think that just wouldn't work because of the whole Batman thing or what?
See, I think he's another one. There could have been a time when he could have played Bond, I think, that dude. Like he could have been a very dark Bond. I almost feel like he'd have gone the Timothy route as well. Yeah. And I think that time has passed. And I think had he not been Batman, maybe he would have been Bond around that time, 2005, 2006, or
but
maybe
in terms
a touch
of a
earlier.
villain now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I went off on a little mini tangent in my mind there. Of course, in terms of the villain, yeah. Yeah, I don't think he would do it in a million years, but
no,
I feel like he could do. He does. Obviously, he does Psychos very well. So yeah, I feel like that's some potential there for sure.
Okay, on to Kate Blanchett.
Yep, she sits next to Tilda, I think, in the sense.
Yeah.
Tilda, I think, is a bit more nasty and villainous, but yeah, I think that's a good shout.
Okay, Andy Serkis. Obviously, he
Gollum.
could play CGI monster.
Yeah, I'd like
Bond.
that. Yeah. Let's have some more CGI, Chris. That's what we're missing. Let's have loads of that.
That is what we're missing.
I want to see
exactly
Bond go up against an animated character as the villain. That's what I'm looking for next time.
Definitely. And potentially like with an animal head as well.
Yeah.
Like, a bit like, in Live and Let Die, you got Dan Barr and he's got that goat head. Kind of like that, but the goat head is the actual villain.
Yeah.
And it's like this animated goat that he's got to fight against.
Well, you need to go fantastical in your later years. So I could, that might be nice.
Get Serkis on the phone, isn't it?
Yeah, let's do it. Call him up.
But he's actually a really decent actor anyway. He was brilliant in he played that South African villain in was he in Black Panther? Have you seen Black Panther?
It was Black Panther, yes.
It was, and he was short screen time, but he was bloody brilliant.
He was good, yeah.
Okay, on to another previous potential Bond. What about Michael Fassbender as a villain?
Oh, I want to see him as Bond so badly that I would be disappointed to see him as a villain. And I know it's not going to happen anyway.
Could you ever have a villain that's almost out?
Is almost like a clone of Bond.
Outdoes Bond.
Like you could do like one of those old series. I know you had that with
Sean Bean,
yeah.
but like almost, but was that little bit better at everything else. Like it's tricky, isn't it? Like, but I mean, Fassbender, he's got the acting chops for it, hasn't he?
Yeah, he could certainly do a very good job. But I want to see him as Bond so badly. Yeah. But I know that'll never happen, regardless of if he is a future villain or not. But I would. He's another one that can do nutters very well. So yeah, I'd add that.
Okay. What about Sean Penn? He can definitely do a nutter.
He certainly can. No, I don't want him in it.
No. Okay.
I think he's too. I've seen him in too many things.
Yeah.
Yeah, not for me, that one.
Okay.
As a Bond villain.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, I think you do it again. I think he's been in a bit too many things lately.
He'd need to look. I think for me, for that to work for me, he'd need to change his look. Somehow, however it might be, because he has been in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It would be. Would you just be watching it thinking, "Oh, this is Sherlock," or "This is"?
If they announced him, I'd be like, "Oh, all right," but then at the same time, I'd be like. It's a kind of a bit of a down the line choice.
It's a bit too obvious almost, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. What about, we mentioned it earlier, Lars Mikkelsen. So this is Mads Mikkelsen's brother. I think he'd be
I'll
up
have
for
that.
it.
Yep.
Okay, here's another interesting one. Cillian Murphy.
He's good. He does nutters very well, doesn't he? Yeah. He's another one of those that like he's got those icy blue eyes that like they look at you and you're like, oh, I don't like. He puts the shivers down my spine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think he'd be awesome actually.
Yeah. I agree with that. I'd have some of that. Yeah.
Okay, now this is probably an interesting one. What about Tom Hardy? You know how apparently Daniel Craig and Tom Hardy don't get on well. If they ended up together on opposite sides within in a film, that might. Interesting.
I've heard a lot of things about Tom Hardy. I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of people don't get on with Tom Hardy. So read into that what you will, but.
Equally, potentially the other way as well, if we're going to be unbiased here.
Yeah, but, let's stick up for our boy and be biased.
Okay. But, right, moving swiftly on, shall we? But Charlize Theron. No.
Just to finish up the Tom Hardy point, I could potentially see it as long as he didn't do a silly voice.
Yeah. That comes as part of the deal.
Mr. Bond! I don't want any of that.
Is that how it sounds?
Yeah, that's how his...
Is that him in Legend? That's how he sounds a bit in Legend. Anyway,
he does. That was my bane, but yeah, go on.
Was it? Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, so moving on. What about Charlize Theron?
Oh my goodness me, I'm a big fan of Charlize. Yes, I can imagine Charlize could be a very nasty person, I don't know whether she's too beautiful. Do you know what I mean?
But you've seen her in films where she's had makeup and looked absolutely...
Yeah, in Monster.
Like
that's a perfect example of that, isn't it?
And the latest one that she's doing, she looks pretty bad.
She's definitely got the chops, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think she might be a bit too mainstream a choice for me.
I guess it depends on the look and the character, but I think there's something there with her.
Yeah.
Okay, on to this one now. Meryl Streep.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not only is she involved in Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia 2, which is I will refuse to watch because it will crucify my childhood by seeing Pierce in that. But no, absolutely not. That's not for me, that one.
No. Okay, 2 more to go. On to, what about Mark Strong?
Again, he's one of those. He's like a go-to villain because there was that thing where we all thought he was the villain inspector for a while, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And he's great. I love him. I think he's been a villain in a lot of things. And rumor has it, if that Instagram thing comes true, he is involved in Bond 25 in some way. I could see him being more of like a C type character, like Denby, or something like that. I don't know whether I'd be that excited to see him as the main villain. Yeah.
Okay. Finally, Marion Cotillard.
That's her from Batman, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And she's Inception.
Yeah, she's cool. I don't know whether she's scary enough to be a main villain. Yeah, I don't know if she's scary enough to be a main villain. I could see her being sort of like a
henchwoman or something.
A henchwoman of some description. Yeah. But yeah, as a main villain, like I think you need to be an absolute balls out psycho. Somebody like a Cillian Murphy or a Rami Malek could do that really well. Or you've got to be somebody who's got like quite a high level of status and like superiority. Somebody like a Tilda Swinton is a perfect example of that, to really pull off a classic style Bond villain. And I don't think I get that either of those from her, really.
Okay, so finally now, before we finish on this question, I'm going to ask you to pick 3 names, or potentially we could do this together. We have to pick which 3 names out of that list we'd really like to see.
We'd really like to see
as a future Bond villain. I think Tilda's got to be in there for me as one of those 3. Are we going to go 3 or 5? What do you think?
Let's do 3. 5 is a bit much, I reckon.
3. Yeah, 5.
I think Tilda's a great choice. I could see her doing great things as a Bond villain.
Yeah.
I think just looking back through your list there's a lot that I'm like I'm getting rid of just out of pure likelihood, like Gary Oldman, Michael Fassbender. Yeah. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things.
I tell you what. Yeah, go on.
Go on. I feel like Oscar Isaac and Rami Malek would be good choices.
Yes. Do you know what? I was thinking the same. And they've both got a similar sort of feel.
They could almost play brothers in a film, couldn't they? Like one would be the evil twin.
I think they could.
Like I feel like Rami Malek would be the evil twin and Oscar Isaac would be the sort of like the one who has to look after him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think either of those 2 would be brilliant, and they both have got those similarities.
Yeah.
I do think Joaquin Phoenix would be a crazy outsider.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd ever do it, but he'd be the crazy one sort of thing.
But, I'd say honourable effort for Paul Bettany.
Yeah.
I think he could be a good choice as well. Like I want him to be something in the realms of that solo character he played there. Like, obviously not that balls out kind of crazy, but like I'd need him to be a bit disfigured. I think he would. That would be a good thing. But I liked his crazy character in that. I thought there's the essence of Bond villain in that performance. If you haven't seen Solo yet, which I'm guessing most people have, check that out and see what you think. But good
There's
shouts.
some hard hitters though. Again, Michael Shannon, Vigo, Andy Serkis, Cillian Murphy.
There's another good choice.
We'll mention as well, actually. So there we go. Yeah, plenty to discuss. But back to the original question. That was brilliant, Dalton. So
nice one, Dalton.
For sending that in.
Good stuff. All right then. Big shout out to everybody that sent in a question. Obviously, if we didn't get to yours, we'll apologies for that. But there's just not enough hours in the day. But we'll hopefully get through all of them for the next mailbag, and we'll obviously do them a bit more often rather than once every 2.5 years. It's like Daniel's run as Bond, isn't it? It's like,
isn't it?
Let's just do, another mailbag in 4 years from now and see. Send them in now and we'll see if, but big shout out to Cheryl Reeves, Tom Barwick, Simon Drake, Trip Pearson, Don Zuderman, Frank McNeely and Dalton Fisher for their questions. You inspired some wonderful discussion today. Not least the PC stuff, because somebody's going to get offended and take us off the air for sure, just for discussing it. Anyway, I think it's time to revisit our listener trivia question of the day, don't you?
I do indeed. So let's have a listen. It's John Mendes.
In 24 official Eon films, only 4 of them don't we get to hear Bond, James Bond.
Okay, so which 4 films do we not hear Bond, James Bond? I'm just going to come straight out with the obvious one, which is obviously Quantum of Solace.
Yes, Quantum of Solace. They made that thing about it.
They made such a big deal about that, and come on, stick it in there anyway. So there's that. I don't think he says it in From Russia with Love.
No, there were 2 different ones I came up with. From Russia with Love was one, and I don't think he says it in Thunderball, because I remember Fiona Volpe says Mr. Bond, James Bond.
You like Wild Things, Mr. Bond, James Bond? Yeah.
But I don't think Bond says
it's
it.
It's a good call.
3.
I don't think he says it. Yeah.
How many did he say there were?
4.
4. Okay, so one more.
He definitely says it in. Does he say it in You Only Live Twice?
Oh, wait a minute. Dr. No, yes. From Russia, Golfing, Thunderball, no.
I don't think he says it in You Only Live Twice. Tom?
No, I think that is it, isn't it? You Only Live Twice on James Bond. No, I think you're on it. I can't think of it. Should we have
That's a surprise. Let's have a listen.
Hello, Tom and Chris. This is John Mendes calling in with the answer to my listener trivia question, which was, in which 4 James Bond films don't we hear Bond saying, Bond, James Bond? The answer is From Russia with Love, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Quantum of Solace. I hope you guessed it right, and I hope no one has called in with a similar question, and continue on the good work.
Nicely done. We pinned the tail on the donkey there, Chris.
I know. Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it with the You Only Live Twice, the one that we couldn't remember. But brilliant. And great question, John. Really
I tell you what, man. I would never have guessed that Connery, on a film-by-film basis, is the Bond who says Bond, James Bond, the least in the number of films that he was in. Obviously, George does.
Crazy. Well, he obviously Dr. No, Goldfinger, and Diamonds. So
is that it? That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I mean, Never Say Never Again, is that counted or not?
I don't know. I don't think I've seen Never Say Never Again enough to know.
No, but even in the others, that is great. It is. That's quite a surprise. But top question, John. Nice. So what's next up, Tom?
Next up, Chris, it's time for the Guess the Quote round.
Bond, James Bond.
Very nice. So it was your quote last week, wasn't it, if I remember correctly?
Yes, indeed. And my quote last week was, come on, lady, move it. Would you like that again, or are you seeming quite confident?
I'm very confident in that.
Okay, let's go for it.
It is the last film that Sean says Bond, James Bond in.
Okay, yeah.
It's Diamonds Are Forever.
It is indeed.
They're at the old petrol station, and Tiffany Case has blocked everybody off, and it's the dude in the car or the van or whatever he's in behind her, getting her to move out of the way.
In the car behind the van, absolutely. Yeah. Lovely stuff, Tom.
Beautiful.
Bang on the money.
I have a new quote for you, Chris.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you prepared?
I am ready and prepared.
Okay, got to get in the mode for this one. Moneypenny, take this release.
Oh, okay.
Can I do it for you one more time?
Good. Yes, please.
Moneypenny, take this release.
Okay. Interesting one.
Yeah, how do you feel about that?
So there's someone that came to mind initially, but now I'm thinking it's potentially not that person.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Good one.
Right, sweet.
Yeah,
Good
I
stuff.
might need a few guesses.
We will obviously find out the answer to that next time. So we had a listener quote last week from Stan Luca, didn't we? So should we have a little revisit of that quote? Let's do it.
Ha! Pathetic.
All right. I'm confident on that one. How about you?
I'm going to say the film.
All right.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
That's true. Absolutely. It is the scene on the stealth ship where Wai Lin tries to like break loose and do some kung fu or whatever she does. And he basally, and he said the bonus point there for what the line that comes immediately
Can
before.
you reenact it for us, please?
Pathetic.
That's pretty damn good.
Yeah. There's a lot. A thing I like about that I especially enjoy that it's stuck in my mind as he's doing all his mock kung fu acrobatics to like ridicule her. Yeah. There's one particular rear shot behind Elliot Carver where he does this little shoulder shuffle where he's like moving his arms out from side to side, and it really amuses me. I used to enjoy that. So look out for that next time you watch Tomorrow Never Dies. Good stuff. Yeah. Nice one, Stan. Thank you for sending that in. And oh my goodness me, we have another listener quote this week, Chris, which is from our man in Dallas, Texas. Our
JBR Dallas.
Our brother from Langley over there, Mr. Derek Brown. Should we have a listen to what he's got for us?
Let's go. Let's play Derek.
Hey fellas, how's it going? Hope all is well. Derek Brown here from Dallas, Texas, home of the Cowboys, the Ewings, and more importantly, JBR Dallas. Thanks again for letting us start the group. We've been having a real blast so far. And thanks for an absolutely stellar podcast. Your passion and enthusiasm for Bond are so darn infectious. And JBR gives Bond fans a fun, safe space to express ourselves, make friends, and just geek out over our favorite super spy. So seriously, thank you. I've been wanting to leave a listener quote for a while now, and I figured it's high time that I just man up and do it. Somebody's already submitted my favorite Jakob Brink line, which of course is, "Pool, extend your arms." So I had to go another route, but I think you'll get a good laugh out of it. So without further ado, here goes. Sure hope you make friends easy. It's super easy, right? But in the unlikely case that someone needs to hear the line one more time, I'll take another run at it. Sure hope you make friends easy. Again, probably not the most challenging quote, but it's always given me a good chuckle over the years, so I couldn't resist. Let me know if you figured it out, and I'll call back shortly with the answer.
Derek's only nailed it there. I mean, the
That was
last episode
amazing.
we were talking about actually getting in the spirit of the performance and the delivery of the original person who said the line, and that is absolutely pinning the tail on the donkey.
That's
That was a
on
great
point,
one.
isn't it?
Yeah, that is also
Yeah.
without, obviously we'll find out the answer next time, without revealing the answer at this point. I think most of our
please.
listener friends and family would know who that is. That dude is one of my favorite things in the entire series, as brief as his screen time is. Yeah.
You can't help but smile as wide as he's smiling on screen.
Yeah, nice one.
Absolutely brilliant. Lovely.
Good
Nice
one,
Derek.
Derek. Yes, absolutely. As Derek mentioned there, he is our man in Dallas, Texas, and he has the JBR Dallas Facebook group. So if you're in the area, stick JBR Dallas into the Facebook search, and Derek's already done, I believe, at least one meetup so far, which has gone very well, and he's kicking ass over there, getting members of JBR Dallas. So make sure you get involved in that. Good stuff. Now, next up, Chris, it is time for
Who wrote the score for Live and Let Die? Who played Helga Brandt? How did she die? Who wants to stockpile the water in Bolivia? It's Tommy Trivia.
That's right, it's time for Tommy Trivia. This is where Chris breaks out the Trivial Pursuit 007 edition and quizzes me on the questions. Now, what have you got for me this week, Chris?
Okay, well, after you've been having some storming performances recently, so I'm hoping there'll be one or two stinkers, but looking down, I'm not sure there will be, but we will see. Okay, we're going to start on gadgets and weapons, Tom. Can you please tell me, what device does Bond use to escape from Jacques Bouvard's chateau?
That would be your mode of getting around Cardiff, Wales, which is a jetpack.
It is, yes, the Bell rocket belt, as I think they call it, but the jetpack is exactly it. Okay, on to locations. Question 2. Where do Bond and Q first meet in Skyfall?
Where do Bond and Q first meet in Skyfall? That would be at the National Gallery in London, on Leicester Square. Trafalgar Square, rather, sorry.
Absolutely. Trafalgar Square, that's it. So 2 out of 2. On to crew and behind the scenes. Which Bond producer also co-wrote the screenplay with Richard Maybaum for Your Eyes Only?
It's got to be Mickey G.
Yeah, it has indeed. 3 out of 3. I want to get some really hard ones for you, but this next one is a big stumper of a question. Are you ready, Tom? Cast and characters. Can you please tell me, I'm not even going to give you the film here. Can you please tell me who plays Triple X?
That would be the beautiful Barbara Bach, Mrs. Ringo Starr.
Absolutely, absolutely fantastic. On to the films. What is Scaramanga's one distinguishing physical feature?
He has a superfluous papilla.
If it says that on the back, let's have a look. Oh man, you get a bonus point for that because all it says is extra nipple. You're so getting a bonus point for that.
Thank you very much.
That's incredible. Okay, final question. Vehicles. Which Moonraker do Bond and Dr. Holly Goodhead take over at the end of Moonraker? Or which one do they fly? Oh, we might have a stumper here, folks. I'll ask the question again. Which Moonraker shuttle do Bond and Dr. Holly Goodhead take over?
I don't know. This is just a pure guess. 4.
It's close. Drax's shuttle was
1.
5. And Bond and Dr. Holly
Goodhead
were in shuttle 6. Moonraker 6
Shuttle
they were
6.
in. So there we go. So you didn't get them all, but you get the half bonus points. You 5.5 out of 6.
All right, I can live with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nicely done. Superfluous papilla, folks. If any of you out there have one, or if you just want to refer to it as a third nipple, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, send it in.
Yes, send it in. Yeah. I remember when we reviewed Man with a Golden Gun and he chucks away the nipple. I'd love to find that stretch of road and delve into that bush and see if that old nipple is still there.
Don't we all love delving into a bush from time to time, Chris?
We do indeed. Delve deeply as we can. Okay, so moving swiftly on. Next, it's time for...
It's the music
That's right, it's time for Guess the Music Cue. This is where Chris gives us a little tiny snippet of Bond music. We have to guess the film and the scene. Now, last week we had a rather delightful one, so I'm going to replay it and then we will have a little chat about it. So here we go. Right, so that's definitely Goldfinger.
It is, yeah, well done.
Obviously, it's Majesty's.
Everyone that's listening now is now thinking, oh, I've listened to the wrong music cue.
That's definitely Majesty's. I think that particular phrase, when it ends on the is basically when he's escaping from Peace Gloria. Is that right?
You know what? It's tricky because a lot of the music does sound quite similar within this film. So there might be something that sounds very similar, which probably it does cover that area. This is one that's a bit later in the film, probably quite a bit later in the film, actually.
Quite a bit later than him escaping Peace Gloria?
Yeah.
Okay, so is that... So I'm just thinking like the raid on Peace Gloria. Is that Fuck.
You're pretty much there.
Is it when
You're
he's
pretty
like
much there.
pursuing Blofeld after Peace Gloria blows up?
No, it's literally just the second before the raid is about to take place. So it's as the helicopters arrive at Peace Gloria, just before all hell breaks loose. That's the final bit of that little bit of music.
Okay,
But,
very nice.
Yeah, great.
One interesting thing about that particular scene when you see the raid on
Yes.
Peace Gloria is there's some dodgy editing when you see the helicopters kind of like circling around. If you keep your eye on the right hand side of the screen, you see one of the helicopters just literally disappear into nothingness gradually. It just fades out.
So
it's
random,
like in
isn't
Back
it?
to the Future when Marty changes the past or whatever, or the future, and the photographs change. It's just like that. It's crazy.
Yeah. We'll have to play a little segment of that.
We should have mentioned that to John Glenn, shouldn't we, when we interviewed him?
Yes. We didn't think about that.
Yeah, he'd have loved it.
Okay. So I have a new music cue. In fact, I don't have a new music cue. We have another guest music cue for you this week. And this is from a JBR listener, Mr. John Ward, who is a good friend of the family. And this is an extra special one because it's not one that he edited, but it's one that he's going to be playing on the Flugel, no less.
On the Flugel?
So,
good Lord. All right.
Yes, man.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
Shall we have a
we sat
listen?
next to him at the Casino Royale Albert Hall thing when they did the live
That's
orchestra.
it, yeah.
And wasn't his brother in the orchestra or something?
His brother was in it. Yeah, his
That's
brother was.
right.
Yeah, part of it.
Okay. Quite a musical family then, the Wards.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right.
Yeah.
Let's have a listen. I'm excited about this.
Hi, this is John from Kent, and here is my entry for the listener quote round for this week. I'm going to recreate it using the Flugel horn muted by a cushion, so not to upset my neighbours.
Oh my God.
That
Do
is
you have any
brilliant.
idea? That is beautiful.
I think I do. I think I've got it. And if it is, that is absolutely fantastic.
I think I might
I'm
have
going to
it
listen
too.
to it again straight away, but we might have to.
Do you know what? I'm gonna listen to that again. Hold on.
That is so good. That is so good.
That might be my favourite guest music cue of all time. That's a beauty.
You know what? I think it is definitely mine, and we will be playing that next week and having a good old chat about that one because that is blinding. I love it.
Absolutely. All right, cool stuff. Nice one,
One,
John.
Cheers.
Excellent stuff. Righty ho, then that about rounds out today's episode of James Bond Radio. Next week we will return as per usual. We've got a couple of cool things coming up. It must be said, though I think we'll probably remain a little bit tight-lipped on at least. Yeah, we'll keep you guessing. We're not going to give you anything. Yeah, you got to guess.
That's it. Yeah. So guess. Yeah. But no, it's been good, isn't it? Get back into the old MI6 mailbag again. So anyone, like we said before, if you want to leave a question for us to debate in a future mailbag, if you go to our website, send a voicemail. Obviously, we won't be doing one next week or the week after, but we'll definitely make sure we do one within the next 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get cracking on one in the new year, I think.
That would actually be pretty good going for Daniel's tenure, wouldn't it? 2.5 years, if every 2.5 years. I'd be up for that. Yeah. It's the 5 years that I struggle with a little bit. It's those big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. 5 years, 6 years, and anything above, 3 really is a bit of a hassle. But there we go. We'll see. Righty
ho then. So James Bond Radio will return. Until then, I've been Tom Sears.
I have been Chris Wright.
And we'll see you next week, everybody.
Bye. Indeed. Bye.
Sure hope you make friends easy.